The movie begins with Johnny, a cowboy from the Western era. Being a man of color, it's impossible for him not to attract attention the moment he arrives. A few seconds later, he pulls out a bullet from his pocket with a name written on it: Brett Clayton. With his gun loaded, Johnny waits patiently in the saloon while keeping one eye on the bank across the street and the other on his whiskey glass. After a few minutes, he hears a commotion outside. Some equally bad men are beating up a young man and his wife, prompting the protagonist to intervene for the young couple's sake. After a short but exciting fight, Johnny is surrounded by the townspeople who point their guns at him, until the sheriff arrives to place him under arrest. Now behind bars, the officers can't stop talking about how they haven't hanged a black man in a long time. It's something they used to do often, but no one comes to town anymore. Just when they're about to ask Johnny why he's come, an old man shows up and informs them that Brad Clayton and his gang are robbing the bank. Exactly what Johnny had been waiting for, and he's stuck in a cell. At this point, we get a glimpse of the past when the protagonist was only 10 years old. He and his father performed a shooting exhibition that entertained the crowd and earned them just enough money to subsist. Brad Clayton was among the crowd, and the idea that people loudly applauded a black man's skills seemed abominable to him, as he is an extremely racist man, just like his band of thieves. After robbing the bank and killing everyone present, as is their custom, Brett and his gang escaped without a trace, until that night when he returned to challenge Johnny's father to a duel and killed him in front of his son. Back in the present, Johnny's sentence has been pronounced, and the officers prepare to hang him for his actions. Fortunately, the couple he saved the day before does not plan to let their hero die and have brought their family to support them, thereby saving Johnny from his inevitable death and returning his belongings that had been stolen from the station. With a new chance to avenge his father, Johnny flees into the desert to get away from the officers chasing him. But water is scarce, leading to the death of his horse and soon possibly his own. Luckily, he is found by Percy, his brother of color, who has chosen God's path and works as a reverend. Percy is headed to a nearby town where he plans to establish a church. The survivors become friends and plan to travel together to the town Percy has chosen to put down roots. However, the journey is dangerous because it's full of Native Americans who kill anyone who trespasses on their land. During an attack, Percy is taken hostage, and Johnny has had to flee in a wagon to avoid the same fate. In the wagon, he finds love letters addressed to Percy from someone named Bessie. She tells him she is eager to finally meet him and informs him that she already has a house where they can live when he arrives. Seemingly convinced that Percy is dead, Johnny decides to take his place by using his cassock to pretend to be the town's new reverend. Percy, on the other hand, is suffering a fate worse than death. The chief of the native village has decided that Percy is fit to marry his daughter and has scheduled an immediate wedding to unite their destinies. Meanwhile, Johnny has arrived in Hope Springs, a beautiful town where black people share their lives without any sign of racism. Although they live in peace, they have a strong sense of the law, and the sheriff immediately mistrusts this new pastor who just arrived, especially because pastors do not carry guns. He asks Johnny to recite some Bible passages, putting him in a difficult position. Fortunately, Bessie has seen the wagon and is certain that her Prince Charming has arrived. By using what he read in the letters, Johnny manages to convince her that he is Percy, and she saves him from the officers. Now that he's the new pastor of the town and has gained the favor of the officers, who finally leave him alone, Bessie takes him to what will be his new home. There, the faithful congregants are waiting to welcome him. They are all eager to hear Sunday's sermon because it turns out that 5 nearby communities will be coming to attend the new church's inauguration. Unable to give a religious speech, Johnny opts to flee but is surprised by Ned, who hands him the keys to the church's safety deposit box at the bank, which holds more than $5,000 at his disposal after the inauguration. Meanwhile, Percy has managed to escape his terrifying wife and is now heading to Hope Springs and his beloved Bessie. During all this, we finally meet the villain of this particular town. His name is Shelley, and he has been forging documents to seize people's land. Anyone who refuses to sign ends up dead, just like the old pastor. The next morning, Boff, a ruthless man, shows up and starts shooting all over town, demanding to see Jesse, who is the main defender of the townspeople's rights. Obviously, he's been hired by Shelley to instill terror and pressure people into selling their lands. Unfortunately, the sheriff turns out to be a coward and does nothing to stop him. Fortunately, Johnny's not afraid to teach this troublemaker a lesson. A few minutes later, Jessie appears, and the crowd shows their appreciation for her. She is a well-educated young woman who would give her life to defend the town. She can quickly see that Johnny is no pastor at all, but he is a strong man who can protect the town if necessary. Besides, Percy has arrived to expose him at just the right moment, but he's so dehydrated that he can't say anything but nonsense, giving Johnny the chance to have a private conversation with him in which Johnny threatens him if he tells the truth and forces him to help with his sermon. He then promises that after Monday, he will leave and let Percy continue with the life Percy had planned. Sunday arrives, and after pretending he had to exorcise the demons from Percy's soul, Johnny convinces the congregants that the price for saving this poor man's soul has been his voice. Therefore, Percy, who calls himself Dickens, will deliver the ceremonial sermon in front of everyone, since his soul has been saved by the Lord. Meanwhile, Johnny is making moves on Jessie, who piqued his interest from the first moment he saw her. However, he's unable to maintain the facade that he can't speak, so shortly after, he introduces himself to the community to give his speech anyway. When sermon time comes, Johnny remembers the lessons his father taught him and the importance of forgiveness. He uses that for inspiration in his speech, winning over the hearts of his congregation and saving himself from that tense situation. That night, Johnny finds a letter from the old reverend in which he confesses that Shelley threatened to kill him for control of the church's land. Deciding to momentarily abandon his cover and do what he does best, seek justice for the innocent who don't have the strength to defend themselves, he looks for his guns, but they've been stolen. As he leaves his room, he hears gunshots and sees that the sheriff has been killed with one of his own guns. In search of help, Johnny goes to Jessie, who is the strongest woman he knows. Besides, she's the voice of the town and will know how to confront this Shelley character using the letter the Reverend left behind. Jessie flips the letter over and notices a map drawn on the back, finding that there's an oil deposit hidden on church land. That's why the old Reverend was killed. She also discovers she's inherited that land, making her the legal owner of the church property. Johnny reveals his identity to Jessie and then asks for her help to save the town from that Shelley fellow. He's grown fond of everyone, and revenge no longer motivates him as much as justice does in defending the weak. Meanwhile, Shelley has grown tired of this dispute over the church's land and has threatened the mayor. If he doesn't hand over the land within 24 hours, Shelley will send mercenaries to burn the town. When the mayor informs the congregants of Shelley's threat, Jessie decides to fight for their future, since that oil could provide for the town for years and improve everyone's life. But the rest of them are cowards who are unwilling to die for a life they've never known. To make matters worse, the only man capable of standing up to Shelley's men is Johnny, but he's been arrested for the sheriff's murder and will be hanged soon. Percy is allowed to visit him to say a final goodbye before his hanging. At that moment, Johnny confesses that in this small town, he found something more than his desire for revenge. He found a purpose. He's also fallen in love with Jessie, and for the first time, he's truly afraid to die. Meanwhile, Shelley has managed to kidnap Jessie and plans to force her to sign the documents handing over the property she inherited. When Bessie learns this, she goes to Johnny and hands him a Bible where she has hidden something very special, the key to his cell. This allows him to catch the officers by surprise and lock them up so they won't interfere with his mission to save the town and rescue Jessie, who refuses to give in to Shelley's threats. Shelley gives her two options: sign, or the men he hired will burn the town and kill anyone who opposes his will. Using a distraction to make them think there's a new sheriff in town, Johnny infiltrates Shelley's house and rescues Jessie. He then surprises the henchmen from behind and disposes of them so he can have a talk with Shelley, who doesn't stop being a ruthless man. Shelley reveals that he has spent a large amount of money hiring Brad Clayton's gang, who have already arrived in town and have begun their reign of terror. Luckily, our protagonist arrives in time to defend the town and the people who have given him a new purpose in life. A shootout ensues, with the entire town fighting for their safety and future. wanting a life free from Shelley's grasp and his endless greed. Shortly thereafter, the moment arrives for Johnny to finally face the man who killed his father. But instead of drawing a gun, he pulls out the Bible that Bessie gave him as a sign that he forgives Brett for his sins. Regardless, Brett still tries to shoot him. Luckily, even though Johnny is a new man, that doesn't mean he's going to let himself be killed so easily. He fires before Brett can fully draw his weapon. Now the town is not only free from Shelley, but it's also on the verge of improving thanks to the newly discovered oil deposit. The future has never looked better for the protagonist.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.